Here we are, another Monday, talking about Monday Night Raw from April the 28th, 2025. Let us get into this thing. No news and notes for real. So, we're still rolling after WrestleMania. And Seth Rollins is now the future of the industry, I guess. That's a 40-year-old with a bad back and bad knees. All right. He's also wearing some really goofy glasses. Very goofy. He did a whole lot of nothing when it comes to talking, but he's interrupted by Sami Zayn, who called the faction of Heyman, Rollins, and Brian Breaker a load of crap. Says that Rollins is involved with Heyman, so he's no different than Roman Reigns and CM Punk. He was just jealous of them and wanted their spot. Then they argued about whether Rollins was a hypocrite or not. With Sami Zayn saying that Seth Rollins just created his own bloodline. Seth Rollins gave him the old Beanie Siegel get down or lay down treatment. And he said he doesn't want Sami Zayn to be a target. So he's going to pull some strings. Get Sami Zayn off of Raw. And get him onto SmackDown as a favor. It's not a threat. It's just a favor. And then he says that he wants this at the end of the night. He wants an answer at the end of the night about whether Seth Rollins is going to accept this offer. For starters, I want to give Seth Rollins credit. I mean, he's wearing a $13,000 coat. It was revealed on Twitter. I think it's $13,500. And he wore some Party City glasses to go along with it. You got to respect the grift. So, this is a good hook if you're just tuning into the show. They gave you one of the I need an answer by the end of the night gimmicks. So, of course, throughout the night, various people are walking up to Sami Zayn. And one of those people was Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman sweetened the pot by saying that he's got a WWE Championship match set up for Sami Zayn if he decides to leave. If he leaves Monday Night Raw, he will instantly become the number one contender for the WWE title. He'll be facing either Randy Orton or John Cena. Karrion Kross wants him to make the best decision. Jey Uso wants him to make the best decision. So we get to the final segment of the show. And the crowd at this point in time have seen a whole lot of nothing. They're not really all that enthused. But they are willing to sing along and play along with this. Rollins says that him and Sami Zayn have been friends for 20 years. He knows that Sami Zayn doesn't agree with his direction, but this is the best way forward. He's disappointed that Sami doesn't believe in him. He says some very bad things will happen to Sami Zayn if Sami Zayn doesn't accept this deal. Sami Zayn says that Seth Rollins is playing mind games with him. They have been friends for 20 years, and he knows that Seth Rollins knows that Sami Zayn has dreamed of becoming a world champion, and now he's dangling it over his head. And he says that, but he's never been the man that runs away. He said he can live with being targeted, but he will not live with being threatened. One day he will become a world champion, and when he does, he'll do it the right way. He does not need any favors from Seth Rollins. Then Brian Breaker, who is, you must as well call him Bronze Breaker at this point. I mean, the guy's he's tanned beyond belief. He has the opposite of Sting at Starrcade problem. Sting came in, boy, he was pale as a fish. This Braun Breaker, I mean, he's coming in deep fried. I mean, Jesus Christ. he almost dark enough for a roll in the color purple at this point. So then Braun Breaker comes in, and Sami Zayn had run his mouth at Braun Breaker earlier, so now he's got to pay the price. The crowd was extremely bored by this, and because of that, I wasn't that interested either. Until Braun Breaker speared Sami Zayn. And instead of pinning him, he speared him again. At this point, Seth Rollins offered Sami Zayn another chance to take the deal. One last chance. Seth Rollins told him to go to hell. Sami Zayn told Seth Rollins to go to hell. So he gave him a third spear. And then Sami Zayn rolled to the floor. The referee stops the match. And Sami Zayn ends up getting a fourth spear on the floor. And everybody's definitely concerned, and there's officials all over the place. Sami Zayn is beat to shit. Then we get the big stomp from Seth Rollins to finish the job. And Sami Zayn was one man standing against three and was completely ruined. And now you see what your main event of WrestleMania 42 is. You are aware of that, are you not? That Sami Zayn will be winning probably the World Heavyweight Championship WrestleMania next year. You don't believe me? Well, they set the ground rule. They set all the foundation right here. They set up Sami Zayn as being a guy who gave away a guaranteed championship match. Well, they wouldn't do that if they didn't plan on having him get something approximate to a championship later. They set up all of these people, these roadblocks. Sami Zayn has Braun Breaker as a roadblock, Seth Rollins as a roadblock, probably Karrion Kross as a roadblock. And you could easily, I guess, juice several months out of that feud. And it's more than likely that Sami Zayn is going to be facing Seth Rollins for the world title at WrestleMania next year. I can just see it coming because Triple H is a very rudimentary booker. And this is something that The Rock's not going to come in and get involved with. I don't think The Rock gives a shit about the Sami Zayn story or the Seth Rollins story or anything like that. So this is a story which, The Rock can get involved with. Now, let's talk about the ideas here. The ideas here is that Seth Rollins says that this is division, but he doesn't say what division is. This is always how his character has worked. His character is always obsessed with the future, but he has never quite articulated what it means to be the future. When he says that Braun Breaker is the future, how so? How is Braun Breaker the future? How was he picked? What was the process of recruiting him as your first crown jewel? That was all left out. And those are things that kind of need to be explained, and you could always say, well, we'll explain it later. But will they actually explain it later? Did they ever explain why The Rock was hanging out with Travis Scott? Was that ever explained later? Was it ever explained that why Travis Scott never appeared after WrestleMania? Nope, not at all. They didn't explain it at all. So they have a big explanation problem. We need to figure out why Heyman decided to side up with Rollins. They didn't really explain that. And Heyman seemingly he's on board, but we can't get on board. We don't know what they're doing or why they're doing it. We just know that this is another one of these. Seth Rollins is talking about the future again, guys. It's a sort of a return to the Monday Night Messiah in a sense, So, but everybody likes Braun Breaker. I do too. Everybody likes him with Paul Heyman. I do too. Everybody likes, not a lot of people like Rollins, but you got to have a front man in your group. And Rollins is suited for the job. But I'm not a huge fan of the long form story of this. Because the long form story of this, again, ends with Sami Zayn, an absolute dork, being the world champion. Now, it is the world heavyweight title. It's not likely to be the WWE championship. And I really do like Sami Zayn in the same way that I like Mick Foley. And there is something charming about them. They do very well on an underdog status. But I do question how he's even going to be an effective world champion. I don't think he'll be an effective world champion, but you can see that they're planting the seeds now for Sami Zayn to be the world champion. But For me, it's also kind of weird because I want Braun Breaker in that spot, but this might just be one element of, hey, he's gonna beat Seth Rollins and lose to Braun Breaker, so maybe Braun Breaker will be champion in 18 months. Around this time next year, we'll be talking about Braun Breaker becoming world champion. But this is also kind of a bad thing when it comes to long form storytelling, is because now we know what the end game is. If you're not in, you can check out. So if you're not down with Sami Zayn being the world champion, then you can just check out of this story. That's the unfortunate thing. And there doesn't seem to be much else going on here to fill in, but hopefully they make it entertaining, because that's really what matters at the end of the day. The match with Sami Zayn and Braun Breaker was mid. The crowd just didn't seem to care, and that was unfortunate. But the promos and everything were very strong, so I'll give it a thumbs up. The first match of the night, Rhea Ripley versus Roxanne Perez. Roxanne Perez is very, very tiny. She worked Rhea Ripley's leg. Still took a nasty razor's edge from Rhea Ripley, though. Roxanne Perez is using Miko Satomura moves, like she did like the head spring, knee smash thing. And then out of nowhere, here comes Julia, who chop blocked Rhea Ripley and took her down. At that point, Io made the save, and then she got jumped too. And then Julia and Roxanne Perez fled as the babyfaces started to begin a comeback. Later on, Io and Rhea had words where Rhea said that she didn't need the help. But Io said, sort of like it did to me. So they're even now. I guess they're about to be unlikely friends, I suppose. The match itself was solid enough. Rhea did a good job of making Roxanne look legitimate. Roxanne did a good job of making herself look legitimate. The only problem here is she's extremely small. She's very, very small. So then there's that. But the question, of course, is Julia, Roxanne Perez, and Stephanie Vaquer, are they being called up? Because why are they on Raw? I understand why you would bring them on Raw, because you have a weak women's division. I mean, Bayley is out for now, and Bianca Belair has been moved to SmackDown, and she's out for now, and Liv Morgan is out for now. What do you got left? You're in dire straits when it comes to the women's division on Raw. But you still do have women that don't get a lot of TV time and don't really get featured. One of which was Ivy Nile, and she was featured on this show. We'll talk about it when we get there. So it makes sense why they would bring in Stephanie Vaquer and Roxanne Perez and all of these characters, because the roster has been depleted. I don't know whose fault that is, but it's somebody's fault. Ultimately, the match was solid, and they didn't beat Roxanne, which of course means they're probably going to go back to it later. What does this mean for the world title? Are we looking at Io versus Roxanne, Io versus Julia, a tag team match? Which is probably the one option I'm thinking of. Is it's probably going to end up being some kind of tag team match. They also mentioned that Io will be popping up on NXT tomorrow, likely to have some kind of face-to-face with Julia. It could quite possibly be building that match, a Julia-Io Sky match, which could be pretty good. There's some heat there, I think. Some interest. So there's a lot going on in this women's division, but it's clearly weakened after WrestleMania. It could use an infusion of talent, but maybe some of the people that you're shipping off to TNA, like their Fatal Attractions and your Chemical X and all of them should be brought up. Maybe, and I get it, you want to send them to TNA because, well, they aren't that good and they're not huge stars, while Julia and Roxanne, or at least Roxanne's been in NXT for a long time, and Stephanie Vaquer is a huge star. Okay, you want to bring them in because they have star power, but you should really consider making space for the other girls who have been busting their ass in NXT. They should get that opportunity too. even if it's not, long term. The idea that Gigi Dolan has been signed since like 2018 is psychotic, because she's been down there like 6 or 7 years. It's been a long time. JC Jane got signed in 2021, or 2020 when Evolve closed, because she was working in Evolve at the time. Like, there's a lot of people in NXT that need to get out of there. And so if you have a diminished division, you should definitely consider bringing people up, but not the very best of the roster. Maybe, one of the best. If you want to bring up Julia, okay. You want to bring up Roxanne and Julia, fine, because Roxanne's been down there for a while. But then you should populate the rest of the show with, mid-carders, tag teams and stuff. I mean, that's just makes sense. Logan Paul is out there, says he's done everything except win a world title, which is a damn lie. There's 100 titles he ain't never won. He never won a King of the Ring. He never won the Money in the Bank. He never won a tag team championship. He's never climbed Mount Everest. He's never, caught a fish with his bare hands or anything like that. There's 100 things he hasn't done. So he called out Jey Uso. Jey Uso said that there's a fire within him that is never going to be quenched, and that this championship is earned, and if he wants it, he's going to have to come and take it. Logan Paul says that Jay's going to do what he always do, which is crash out and lose the title, and Jay kicked him in the face. Got a huge reaction for Jey Uso kicking Logan Paul in the face, and one of the biggest reactions of the night, to be fair. Now, there's a lot of hand-wringing and slow songs and flower bringing for Logan Paul versus Jey Uso, which is now, I'm guessing, official as a match for the World Heavyweight Championship. Later, as Sami Zayn was talking to Jey Uso was giving him words of encouragement, and then he got sucker punched by Logan Paul. So this match is pretty much set. Now, a lot of people, all your work raiders, a lot of these guys who talk about, Toshiaki Kawada, they're so worried about this match being any good. But there was one good point that was made. And it's a similar point to the one I just made about bringing up the girls from NXT. You do have a lot of people on the roster who are workhorses, guys who work very, very hard. And Logan Paul is getting an opportunity that they don't get. And the same thing can be said for Pat McAfee, who is also going to be on Backlash in a wrestling capacity. You got a guy like Karrion Kross, who just cut one hell of a promo over WrestleMania weekend. And instead of rewarding him by putting him in a storyline, putting him in the ring, giving him a spot, he has to watch Logan Paul and Pat McAfee get pay-per-view spots. Now, it's hard to say what other people have earned versus what other people deserve and all that kind of stuff. So I choose not to make that argument. What I will say is, if I was on that roster, I would be frustrated. If I were, one of these guys that have been benched for weeks at a time, if I missed WrestleMania and then there's nothing for me even afterwards, I would be very frustrated. If I see Pat McAfee's going to get a featured match on pay-per-view, if I'm seeing Logan Paul's going to get a featured match, well, I mean, the Logan Paul thing seems okay because it was set up by him beating AJ Styles. Seemingly that was the reason why he beat AJ Styles. But I still would, you would still get a grumble or so out of me. But at the same time, though, most of the top guys are just gone. Like CM Punk is gone. He's gone. And they moved Drew McIntyre to SmackDown. So you really don't have too many guys you could have put in this spot. But, and then, of course, Rey Mysterio is also hurt. But if you're a guy like a Dragon Lee, you're a guy like Karrion Kross, you got to be looking at this and thinking, like, what the fuck did I do wrong? That, Now, to be fair, Dragon Lee shouldn't be wrestling Jey Uso. Jey Uso is a babyface. And Logan Paul, in so much as You want a heel that can stand up with Jey Uso, somebody that is, you put your top bad guy in there and your top good guy in there. This is as close to the top bad guys you're going to get, which is probably a third string top bad guy. Because it's clear that Seth Rollins is the top bad guy, right? And with him comes Brian Breaker and Paul Heyman. You know, those guys are untouchable. They're next level. You could put them in the legend category. The second would be your very high level guy. So you got Gunther. Gunther is going to be in some kind of specialty match as well, so you can't use him either. At that point, you really only got Logan Paul in that position that could challenge Jey Uso for the title unless you were going to turn somebody. And they decided not to do that. I mean, they've beat Finn Balor to paste. Carlito is not worth anything. JD McDonough's not worth anything. The New Day is in a tag team not worth anything. So, really, what are your options when it comes to Logan Paul? Bringing somebody up from NXT? Turning somebody heel? You know, like, that's really your only option. So, if you're complaining about Logan Paul versus Jey Uso, what is your counter offer? El Grande Americano? Karrion Kross? It's one of these bums in Judgment Day? I don't know what your options are. The only other option you got is Rusev. And they're not doing that because he's just gotten back. And for some reason, it's better for him not to do that? I don't know. I don't have all the answers. But I'm also not against Logan Paul versus Jey Uso in a match that the crowd seemingly is interested in by looking at the reaction to Logan Paul getting kicked in the face. That's absolutely something that they want to see. And Jey Uso, they want to see him beat up Logan Paul. I am not mad at that. So, I mean, it's not something I would have picked, but it works out fine. You know, Jey Uso's not going to lose the belt. It ought to be a showcase match. People are worried about the work rate of the match. Like, get over that, please. Go back to watching your strong Kobayashi matches or whatever the fuck. All right, so the Judgment Day, Finn Balor, JD McDonough, they're having issues because the Judgment Day is always having internal issues. They ended up losing to the War Raiders. This match was insanely long. It was entirely too long. It really drained me of a lot of my strength. I just, 4 guys, none of whom the crowd even cares about, which is very unfortunate for Finn Balor. But he's been beaten so much and been made to look like such an idiot over the last 8 years, maybe? Since his call-up, since he got injured on his call-up. You know, there have been flashes of they're going to do something with Finn. And each time, they basically put a boot on his neck or tied a new anchor around his ankle to the point where people have given up. Now, nobody even believes in Finn Balor anymore. And JD McDonough, well, he was a bum from the jump. Who cares? And the War Raiders, my goodness. You can't imagine a team that's less over unless you count the Motor City Machine Guns. So, but the plan here was they still trying to get Finn Balor some championships so that he'll stop being jealous about Dominic and the rest of them. But once again, they fail. This time it's because of Penta. Penta cost them this match. They were very upset with them. JD McDonough and Penta are going to wrestle next week. Chad Gable actually confronted Penta and said that his favorite part of WrestleMania was watching Phoenix get beat by El Grande Americano, and Penta kicked him in the face and called him a pendejo. They didn't bleep it out either. Amazing. So, here's the thing, man. Penta is already treading water. His upward mobility has stopped. You know, the Intercontinental Championship, I guess with them just putting it on Dominic, you kind of want to let Dominic rock for a little bit. And guess what? I'm actually very excited for what they're planning to do with Dominic, and I want to talk about that in a second. But, you know, they derailed Penta, and now he's without a storyline, and now he's jammed up with goddamn Judgment Day. The Judgment Day is, they don't quite got Big Show heat with me, but almost, man. I can tell you this, I'm not really feeling anything that has to do with Judgment Day. You know, outside of Dominic and Liv, you can just chuck the rest of Judgment Day in the goddamn bin. And that's sad to say because I actually like Finn Balor. But that match was pointless. Becky Lynch shows up to show John Cena how it's done. Becky Lynch comes out and immediately says that she is the one who attacked Bayley and said that Bayley has been attacking her and beating her up since 2019. And now she's going on podcasts crying about not being a bigger star. And then she says, I showed you why you're not a bigger star when I showed up at WrestleMania. She says that there's an old adage, my enemy of my enemy is my friend. She says the opposite is also true. The friend of my enemy is my enemy. Bayley's been attacking me for 6 years, and Lyra Valkyria decided she's going to be her friend. And she says that she tried to warn Lyra, but Lyra's already been corrupted. She's already a loser. She's a compromised already. Lyra comes out and is shaky at first, says that the locker room warned her about Becky Lynch, that Bayley warned her, but she believed in Becky Lynch. Now she sees it. She's going to make Becky Lynch pay. She gets in the ring and Becky Lynch flees. She leaves the ring. Lyra Valkyria mentions that she beat Becky Lynch for the NXT Championship. But Becky Lynch says, I'm not fighting because you beat me before. I'm fighting because it doesn't matter. I only fight when it matters. Lyra says, okay, I'll put the Intercontinental Championship on the line at Backlash. Of course, Becky agreed. Then Lyra Valkyria says that she no longer wants to be the new Becky Lynch. She's going to be a better person than Becky Lynch, and she's already a better wrestler. So Becky starts ranting and raving outside the ring, but she got too close to the ring, and then Lyra Valkyria was able to jump outside the ring and get her. They had a bit of a scruff before they were separated, and I have to tell you, this was infinitely better than I expected it to be. Lyra Valkyria is not the most confident promo in the world, but she's got to get used to it. But she did show some really good fire here, especially in the later part of the promo. And Becky Lynch just coming out and leaving no stone unturned. I like this. I like this. You know, Becky's voice can be a little bit frustrating. The crowd, I don't think, wants to boo Becky. They never do. And again, she insists on being a heel every time she returns. It's clearly about, lifting up Lyra. But they're playing off of, obviously, real history, real heat. That Becky Lynch is selfish. This is a storyline that's been much like a lot of horsewomen storylines. They're kind of ripped from the headlines. Now, remember before when this was probably one of my favorite lines during Liv Morgan's initial singles push, not the initial one, that would be incorrect. During the singles push that led to her becoming the big star that she is, she ended up wrestling Becky Lynch. And one of the lines that she said is that Becky Lynch's new big fat contract comes at the expense of her friends being released. And I remember that struck a chord with people on the internet because they was like, why would they tell her to say that? I think Vince was still there when this happened, because this was when Liv Morgan was about to have her last chance for the world title and all that, and they had just fired the other two members of the Riot Squad. But I think specifically they fired what's her name, the one with the nose, Ruby Soho. And it was a cutting line because it's about how the horsewomen only really look out for themselves. The horsewomen, they kind of have a reputation. Well, 3 of the 4 have a reputation for, being heavy politickers and mostly, advocating for themselves while also claiming that they advocate for others. Now, it did come out recently. I think that, what was that girl's name? Tegan Knox. She talked about how she, literally saw Becky Lynch advocating for other women and all this kind of stuff. While, Sasha Banks talks a lot about it, but never actually does it. And Charlotte might just be nice, but, when she's in Charlotte mode, that's not really friendly mode. So, it's clear that Becky Lynch came back to do this with the intention of lifting up Lyra Valkyria, which is why she wanted to turn heel immediately. before the fans really get a chance to fall in love with her again. But Becky Lynch's promos, she reminds me a hell of a lot of Roddy Piper. And what I mean by that is not just that she's not as witty as Roddy Piper, but she's as manic as Roddy Piper is. She's prone to making weird voices and, moving around a lot. But she's very energetic, and that works. But sometimes it can be too much and you get into manic territory. And when she gets to rambling and all that stuff, that's when she's in manic territory. And manic promos, it really only work for Ric Flair. To most other people, when they get all hyped up, they start losing their train of thought and things get worse. But, she's okay. Could do without her voice, though. But this did it wonders for Lyra. I think this is the promo that Lyra needed to cut. This is a storyline that she needed to sink her teeth into. And they're roping Bayley into this thing already. So Bayley is not forgotten. And I kind of figured this was going to be the case when they took Bayley out of the WrestleMania match. I figured she was still going to be involved with this storyline. But now they're building a big Becky Lynch versus Bayley feud, this time with Bayley being the babyface. The likelihood that Becky versus Bayley is the match for the Intercontinental Championship, man, that would mean Lyra has to lose it. And Lyra losing it, letting Becky run with it, and then Becky dropping it back to her could be helpful. I don't think it's really all that helpful for Lyra to beat Becky again, because I don't think it really helped her the first time. Most people just didn't know enough about Lyra Valkyria when she beat Becky for the title. Just a lot of people didn't know enough about her. So I think she needs to show something, and the best way to show something is put her in the chase position. Have her lose the belt to Becky, and then put her in the chase position. And let's see some intensity. Let's see some fire. Show us what this bird shit is all about. Like why are you wearing wings and all that stuff? Let's see what all that's about. So I am interested in what they're doing here. And finally, it only took 4 months, but they finally got a feud for the Women's Intercontinental Championship. Can you believe that? All it took was for Becky Lynch to come back. Jeez, how about it? All right, Ivy Nile versus Stephanie Vaquer. Stephanie Vaquer, of course, wins the match. Ivy Nile is an interesting case because she looks like an American Gladiator. I am a fan of her look, and her wrestling is not bad. The problem is she's kind of got double negative aura, and mostly because she can't talk. I told y'all before, when she was on NXT, as soon as she starts talking, you just start seeing pink pillows and fluffy couches. It's like she's one girl who sounds girlier than she looks. Like, she looks like she eats granite, but when she talks, she just sounds so frilly and princessy. I don't know. But the crowd died. Every time Ivy Nile had offense, the crowd just did not care. Just could not have cared less about Ivy Nile. They cared a little bit more about Stephanie Vaquer, though. So Stephanie won, even though Chad Gable cut a promo saying that his Lady Liberty, Ivy Nile, was going to be the face of the women's division. Very unfortunate, because that is not true. I think Ivy Nile needs a real manager. Like, she's part of this stable, and the stable works, and everything is fine. But she needs somebody to hype her up. Like if Chad Gable was just permanently like the Bobby Heenan for Ivy Nile, she probably would get over. But as long as she's in these matches sparingly, and you don't know anything about her except for how she looks, and that she just hangs out with Chad Gable and the Creed brothers, she's never going to get over, and she's going to be mid-card forever. Maybe that's what they want, though. Maybe they don't want another top girl. Maybe they just like having, jacked up mid-carders around. Anyway, Rusev's promo shook the foundation of the wrestling internet. Okay, I'm exaggerating, clearly. But he did take I don't know if it might not even been an intentional shot at AEW, but he took a shot at AEW. In the promo segment, which was not in his normal Redeemer voice, it was actually extremely normal voice, says that he had it all at one point and then he lost himself. Said he was going back home to Bulgaria and he fell into the abyss being AEW, of course, where he found himself and fixed himself. He said he will no longer be fighting for a woman that wasn't his and a flag that never was. He will crush, not because he was told to, but because he wants to. And he wants to target those who are arrogant, those who are cocky, those who waste their talents in the same way that he did. He wants to redeem them. He wants to fix them. And I said, okay, this is good. I wish he would have put the voice on. You know, to me, this was a missed opportunity because you should have done it's the Redeemer character. Clearly, it's the same character. But they put him in front of like these production boxes and very generic looking. And I was like, stained glass, dog. You know, like put him in a church, like a confessional with stained glass around. Like, it's clear that they probably didn't call Bruce to come and shoot a vignette for this guy. But just putting it like doing these interviews in front of these plain ass production boxes. I want that to stop. I hate that. I don't know when it started, but I hate that. When you go back and you watch old wrestling, there's always like a banner, some lockers or something. Like it looks like they're having interviews in a hallway. It's literally like just various randos walking around. It's like, is there no specific interview room? Like you can do something where if Kathy Kelly is chasing somebody down, like, oh, I just saw this guy in the hallway, I'm going to stop him and talk to him. Okay, that's one thing. But it's another thing for there to be a scheduled interview and it's taking place in front of production boxes. Like what the hell is this? What? I don't want to see production boxes behind you. This is the good old days, man, where there was like a banner or something where they could do these interviews. I just don't like the production boxes, man. I don't care what you do. Put the logo behind them or something, the name of the show or something. Just enough of these production boxes, especially when you're trying to get a guy over and his character stuff like this. They needed to go all in. You know, they should have put him in a church. He should have been wearing a suit. You know, stained glass windows, whole 9 yards, maybe even quoting the Bible. Just that's what he was doing in AEW. You know, he was in the dark. He looked creepy. He sounded menacing. This was not bad, but it was nowhere near what I expected when they would eventually do this interview. So he says he's going to be targeting people who have lost their way, essentially. And his first opponent is going to be Otis next week. You're starting off real low. And I'm not feeling very comfortable that two of the biggest signings that Triple H had, instead of doing something exciting with them, he's got one wrestling The Miz and he got the other one wrestling Otis. Meanwhile, Pat McAfee and Logan Paul are in major featured contests at Backlash. But it's very important that Aleister Black beats The Miz. And it's very, very, very important that Rusev beats Otis. These things are very important. They have the utmost importance. You can't possibly just forego doing that and then doing something important with them. No. You can't do that. You got to take your time. Do it right. Because we're building up Sami Zayn over here. Get real. Just get real. Fuck. Why bring this guy back if he was going to do this? Now, of course, all the fans are upset. You know, he's called AEW the Abyss. He called it hell. Well, hell is a state of mind. And if he was trapped at home, unable to work for over a year, maybe he was injured. I think he was injured for some of that time. You know, if, he was being pitched really bad ideas. You know, ideas he didn't want anything to do with. If he was being ghosted by the owner, all these things that we've heard so much about when it comes to AEW. I think Layla Hirsch actually mentioned the same thing, that she was ghosted by Tony Khan too. Now nobody cares about her because she's way down on the totem pole, but pretty much everybody's had the same conversation about not hearing anything from anybody for months on end. And you feel like, damn, do I even still work there? Do I belong? Like, what's happening here? And let's be succinct. He's living his truth. He's speaking his truth, not the truth. You know, it's like one of those Jordan Peterson. You're not smart enough to understand the truth. You know, you're not good enough to tell the truth yet. You know, just don't lie. And so that's what we're in, is a situation here where Rusev, it's not that he's telling the truth, it's that he's just not lying. AEW isn't the best. He dropped his career into AEW and he fell endlessly and finally landed and sat there in the dark for who knows how long. And now he's out of the dark. So it is what it is, man. I don't know if he did that on purpose or not. Whether he did or didn't, not my concern. Hey, Ludwig Kaiser, remember that guy? He cut a promo, I think it was probably doing one of the commercials, where he was offended of being underappreciated and overlooked, and called himself the greatest German export since Mercedes-Benz. I love that. What a great statement. Unfortunately, he was not featured on the show, and he has not been featured in forever. Hey, you know, instead of Gunther wrestling fucking Pat McAfee, why wouldn't Gunther and Kaiser just be a tag team? I mean, Gunther got to be world champion for, 300 some odd days. He got to be Intercontinental champion for 600 days. Maybe he should just go save the tag team division. You know, maybe he'd be tag team champion for 10,000 days or something. That could be fun. And it will be great for Kaiser. And then they're best friends also, and it could work. And if you need, in a pinch, for Gunther to work main events, he could do that too. There's a lot of opportunity there, I think, with Gunther and Kaiser as a tag team, especially since Gunther is going to be, I guess, floating around for a while. Look, I know that the New Day are the new tag team champions, and they haven't had time to really establish themselves, but they've been champions 13 times. Let's go with Kaiser and Gunther as a tag team champions. If we're moving Gunther away from the main event, which it seems like that's what we're doing. Okay, fine. Then put him in the tag team division. That means the first year Triple H took over, he was the Intercontinental champion. The second year, he was the world champion. Third year, he's a tag team champion. And then you could just rotate those things again. And you could use that as a launch pad to get over Ludwig Kaiser. And everything could be worked out well in the world. Okie doke. How about that? Isn't that a better idea than JD McDonough and Finn Balor boring everybody to death? You know? Nobody cares about those guys. And what about Ludwig Kaiser maybe being one of the guys challenging for the Intercontinental title? Dominic Mysterio is kind of a babyface. Kind of. He's a jerk, but he's kind of a babyface. They did a promo segment backstage where Liv Morgan went to Nick Aldis to get time off because she has to do a Hollywood movie. She's going to be a starlet, if you hadn't heard. She's going to be in movies. So Dominic also wants time off because he's the champion. And Nick Aldis told him, no, when you're the champion, your workload doubles. And he wasn't thrilled about that. But Nick Aldis was in there talking to AJ Styles, and Dominic Mysterio made some old man jokes about AJ Styles. And the two of them went nose to nose before Dominic left. And it seems like they're going to book AJ Styles versus Dirty Dominic Mysterio. Guess what? I love that idea. Maybe, just maybe, we don't need Pat McAfee versus Gunther. Maybe we don't need that match. Maybe we do need Dominic Mysterio versus AJ Styles. Maybe we need that match on Backlash. I'm pitching that. I want that. Because that feels and it sounds like something that Triple H is going to throw on Raw. That's what it feels like. You could do Pat McAfee's match on Raw, goddammit. You just do his match on Raw. He's not the draw for me that he is for you guys. I don't give a shit about Pat McAfee wrestling. That's just me, though. So speaking of Pat McAfee wrestling, he cut an absolutely fantastic promo. He cut one hell of a promo. I will never take that away from him. His promo was very good, and it didn't feel rehearsed. The only problem I had is it was a little long, so I'm going to give you an edited version of it. He says that he has not forgotten who he is, and he's still that young dog from Pittsburgh who came from his a blue collar family. He says that he didn't have much, and he's not better looking than anybody else. He doesn't have a lot of money, but he wants his he got a lot of money now, but he said he didn't grow up with a lot of money. But he wants his legacy to be that he worked his ass off and that he worked extremely hard and he gave back to his community. And then he started talking about all the different groups he gave to, which includes LGBT groups. I rolled my eyes at that. He said he wants his legacy to be that he left the world a better place than when he found it. And he says that he wants to, when he dies, be remembered for his loyalty. He wants people to say, that Pat McAfee, he's one loyal motherfucker, right? Got a huge pop because he's allowed to curse, even though it was bleeped. But then he says, because he's a loyal motherfucker, he was loyal to Michael Cole, because Michael Cole was good to him when he first came into this company. So he got to protect his boy. So you got a problem with Michael Cole, you got a problem with me. So then he called out Nick Aldis, because he wants Gunther's suspension lifted, and he wants to be able to fight Gunther. Nick Aldis, he comes out. He's a man who greatly dislikes chaos. He's the GM of a wrestling show, but he doesn't really like all this chaos. He don't like all this fighting. The assets are too valuable to be fighting, but he can put you in a sanctioned contest. And Pat McAfee agreed to the sanctioned contest and then proceeded to call Gunther every bad name in the book before returning to his seat. And I like the Pat McAfee promo. I think it was very good. Him saying, if I die, I die, which is excellent. That's great babyface shit right there. That was really good. But I have no interest in watching this match. I don't want it. If it's a good novelty match, but I don't need this. I don't need this. Do it on TV and replace Pat McAfee with somebody else. Look, I'm not against Pat McAfee wrestling. I think he did a good job all the times that he has wrestled. But I think shackling Gunther with Pat McAfee instead of choosing a champion to fight on Pat McAfee's behalf, to me would have seemed like an opportunity to elevate somebody else. Why not use Pat McAfee's celebrity to elevate someone else? Again, you have a roster full of people who are underutilized. Why not have Pat McAfee say that, I'm going to get me a guy, a friend of Michael Cole's and a friend of mine, and that guy's going to beat the tar out of Gunther at Backlash. And then it could be like a big, who could it be? Who's it going to be? And then it could be like Omos or something. So I'm just throwing things out there, But does anybody truly believe that Pat McAfee is going to defeat Gunther? No, nobody believes that. So why do it? It's a waste of time. Why even bother? I'm pretty sure it's probably a TKO call, and they do stuff like this. Hey, Pat, we need you to wrestle on this show. Why? It's in St. Louis, for God's sake. It's a Backlash. It ain't like a WrestleMania show. But that's fine. Look, I guess if Logan Paul gets to have a match, then so does Pat McAfee. God damn it. Next up, Travis Scott versus Santos Escobar or some shit, I guess. Why not, man? None of this stuff matters anyway, yeah? You got all these guys on the roster, and these guys aren't allowed to do anything. They just sit around and catering and work WWE speed. I never really had that sort of mentality until now. You know, like that's why I want Seth Rollins' vision to be articulated. Like, articulate what your vision is, and then maybe try to have people join the organization, people who agree. You know, like, you could spend an entire year of various guys walking up to Seth Rollins saying, you know what, I agree with you, let me in. And Seth says, no, you gotta go out there and prove yourself. You know, that could be fun. That could be interesting. Or you could tell us why he chose Brian Breaker, and then maybe he's looking for other guys that are the same. Or maybe you could say, well, he's scouting on NXT and all this kind of stuff. A lot of options you got there. But I'm just pitching alternatives. I'm not necessarily against Logan Paul wrestling or Pat McAfee. I am kind of frustrated about the Pat McAfee match because there's no way Pat is winning. And it wouldn't make sense for Pat to win. It's just, let's see the dog that Pat McAfee says he's got in him. Let's see Gunther put that dog down. You know, how is he going to put that dog down? If this is going to be Pat McAfee's exit out of WWE, well, then it might be worth doing. You know, I haven't been thrilled with his work on commentary. He's very markish. He's kind of annoying. I guess he's good for the mainstream attention, but other than that, I really don't have a lot of use for Pat McAfee. You know, old Patrick, old Patricia McAfee. I just don't have whole lot of use for him at this point in time. And plus, I don't have a lot of use for novelty acts on very short cards. You know, Triple H has been doing 5 or 6 matches, and he decided that out of these 5 matches, he's going to put 2 novelty acts on there, both Logan Paul and Pat McAfee. It's like, okay, take one of them off and put them on TV. You know, take your pick which one, but take one of them off and put them on TV, and then give that other pay-per-view spot to guys who deserve it. You know, I'm definitely going to flip my lid if Dominic Mysterio versus AJ Styles ends up on Raw, while Pat McAfee and Logan Paul have matches on the pay-per-view. That's going to make me sick. It's going to make me sick. But the rest of the card is actually not that bad. Lyra Valkyria versus Becky Lynch. Then you got Randy Orton versus John Cena. Who knows what that's going to... That's like a crackerjack prize right there. We have no idea what it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like. That's going to be an interesting one. But, you know, overall, Raw was very talk heavy, which is not necessarily bad because they were setting up things and paying things off. But it does, for the first time in a long time, really grab my attention how thin the roster is, especially on Raw. But let me know what you guys think, and I'll talk to you guys later.
No one does it better.